is also an observatory. That is what a templum is, a place where you take your bearings on things. More than that, it is a working model, a laboratory for demonstrating basic principles by use of figures and symbols, which convey to finite minds things beyond their immediate experience. There the man Adam first sought further light and knowledge. His zeal was rewarded by bestowal from above of principles and ordinances that he was to study and transmit to his children. The temple is the great teaching institution of the human race. Universities are much older than we might ever expect. A university began as a temple of the Muses, who represented all departments of knowledge. The Egyptians called it the House of Life. It was an observatory, a great megalithic complex of standing stones, later columns and pylons, with amazingly sophisticated devices for observing and recording the motions of the heavens. A study of Stonehenge shows that it was a computer of great accuracy, a university set in the midst of sacred groves, botanical and geological gardens and groves. It was a paradise, a Garden of Eden, where all life is sacrosanct. It has often been said the temple is the source of all civilization. A brief statement from a recent article explains that the House of Life in Egypt, where books, which contain some of the earliest poetry, were copied and studied from early times, was a sort of super-graduate school. It was here in this part of the temple that all questions relating to learned matters were settled. The word for poetry means creation of the world. The business of the Muses at the temple was to sing the creation song with the morning stars. Naturally, because they were dramatizing the story of the creation too, the hymn was sung to music. Some scholars derive the first writing from musical notation. The singing was performed in a sacred circle or chorus, so that poetry, music, and dance go together. Lucian's famous essay on the ancient dance, among the earliest accounts, takes it back to the round dance in the temple, like the prayer circle that Jesus used to hold with the apostles and their wives. Jesus standing at the altar in the arms of Adam, and the apostles' wives standing in the circle with them. Some have referred to this as a dance. It is definitely a chorus. So poetry, music, and dance go out to the world from the temple, called by the Greeks the Shrine of the Muses. The creation hymn was part of the great dramatic presentation that took place yearly at the temple. It dealt with the fall and redemption of man, represented by various forms of combat, making the place a scene of ritual athletic contests that were sacred throughout the world. The victor in the contest was the father of the race, the priest-king himself, whose triumphant procession, coronation, and marriage took place on the occasion, making this the seat and source of government. The temple, not the palace, is the source of all government. Since the entire race was expected to be present for the event, a busy exchange of goods from various distant regions took place. This was what the Greeks called a panegyris, an assembly of the entire human race in a circle. The booths of pilgrims served as market booths for great fairs, while the need to convert various and bizarre forms of wealth into acceptable offerings for the temple led to an active banking and exchange in the temple court. The earliest money from Juno Moneta, which had the temple on the hill in the capital, portrays the defending Juno on the coins. You had to bring an offering to the temple. No one came empty-handed. Coming from a great distance, you couldn't bring a pure dove, so you would exchange a token for one when you got to the temple, then make your offering. Jesus drove out of the temple the money changers in the courts who were changing the various monies and also dealing in goods, as well as lambs and doves. It was the center of banking and all exchange. Since the place served as an observatory, all things there tied to the calendar and the stars. Mathematics flourished, astronomy was a muse, history was another muse, for the rites were meant for the dead as well as the living. Memorials to former great ones believed to be in attendance encouraged the production of art, of portraiture, sculpture, and painting. The Romans had no art except the marvelous art of portraiture. Their ancestral busts were amazingly lifelike. They were cut off at the upper chest to represent the person as emerging from the earth, being rescued or redeemed from death. It was an Egyptian custom taken over, but would have flourished anyway. In architectural adornments, the design, the measurements, the midot of the temple structure were very significant. As a scale model of the universe, a cosmic computer, the measurements were all very important. They had to be correct. The architecture of the hierocentric structures was of prime concern. Since from that central point all the earth was measured and all the lands distributed, geometry was essential. The writings produced and copied in the House of Life were also discussed there, giving rise to that aspect of philosophy concerned largely with cosmology and natural science. In short, there is no part of our civilization which doesn't have its rise in the temple. Thanks to the power of the written word, records were kept. And in the all-embracing relationship to the divine book, everything is relevant. Nothing is really dead or forgotten. In the time of the gathering of all things together, we gather everything good that ever was, not just people, that nothing be lost, but everything be restored in this last dispensation. In an all-embracing relationship, nothing is ever really dead or forgotten. Every detail belongs in the picture, which would be incomplete without it. Lacking such a synthesizing principle, our present-day knowledge becomes ever more fragmented. Our libraries and universities crumble and disintegrate as they expand. Where the temple that gave us birth is missing, civilization itself becomes a hollow shell. The temple must be there. It is not just a myth. It is the core of all our civilization. In 1930, this concept began to re-emerge at Cambridge. The Cambridge School began calling what they taught there patternism, because they saw the ancient teachings all falling into the same pattern, which I have just described. In the temple, we are taught by symbols and examples, but that is not the fullness of the gospel. One very popular argument today says, "Look, you say the Book of Mormon contains the fullness of the gospel, but it doesn't contain any of the temple ordinances in it, does it?" Ordinances are not the fullness of the gospel. Going to the temple is like entering into a laboratory to confirm what you have already learned in the classroom and from the text. The fullness of the gospel is the understanding of what the plan is all about, the knowledge necessary to salvation. You know the whys and wherefores. For the fullness of the gospel you go to Nephi, to Alma, to Moroni. Then you will enter into the lab, but not in total ignorance. The ordinances are mere forms. They do not exalt us. They merely prepare us to be ready in case we ever become eligible. We have been assuming almost unconsciously, note well, that our temple is of the same class as the temples of the Egyptians. Let me explain that. The ordinances of the Egyptian temple were essentially the same as those performed in ours, and that can be explained very simply. They have a common origin. The clue is given in Abraham chapter 1, verse 26. Pharaoh, being a righteous man, established his kingdom and judged his people wisely and justly all his days, seeking earnestly to imitate that order established by the fathers in the first generations, in the days of the first patriarchal reign, even in the reign of Adam, and also of Noah, his father, who blessed him with the blessings of the earth. He sought diligently, he sought earnestly to imitate the order that went back to the fathers of the first generation in the first patriarchal reign. The Egyptian ordinance also always had one purpose, to go back to the first time, the time of the first man, who was Adam. The Egyptians didn't have it, and they knew it, so they sought to imitate it. Interestingly, Pharaoh was worried sick about this problem. Pharaoh spent his days in the archives in the House of Life, searching through the genealogical records with the nobles of the court, turning over the records, looking for some genealogical proof that he really had authority. He never found it, and it broke his heart. And Pharaoh, being of that lineage, whereby he could not have the right of priesthood, notwithstanding the Pharaohs would fain claim it from Noah, made a very good imitation, seeking very earnestly to imitate that order which went back to the beginning. So the Egyptian result is a very good imitation of our temple ordinances. My book, The Message of the Joseph Smith Papyri, an Egyptian Endowment, takes you through the Egyptian temple without any mention of the Latter-day Saint temple at all. The latter is not necessary. It's easy to see what is going on, and all this is an open secret among scholars today, so we are not giving anything away. The ordinances do have a common origin. Abraham's comment is the clue. He said the Egyptians did imitate them. The rites of the Joseph Smith Papyri 10 and 11, known as the Book of Breathings, follow a familiar pattern. And to show that I am not reading the pattern into it, I included in the appendix of my book a number of early Jewish and Christian writings, each dealing with Orthodox Jewish and Christian texts as if they were the very same ordinances, which were since lost. The ancient temple ordinances, called mysteries, are found in various degrees of preservation. If you ask what Joseph Smith knew about real temples, I reply, everything. In this connection, there is an interesting sidelight to the word telestial, a word long considered as one of Joseph Smith's more glaring indiscretions. We know now that there are three worlds, the telestial, in which we live, the celestial, to which we aspire, and in between them another world called the terrestrial. It is of neither the celestial nor the telestial. According to the ancients, this world is represented by the temple, the in-between world, where the rites of passage take place. Indeed, the root telos is a very rich word in this regard and has been treated a lot recently. It deals with the mysteries. Telos means initiation. Teleomai means to be introduced into the mysteries. Professor Werner Jaeger of Harvard, a close friend of mine who wrote Paideia, was much exercised with that word, teleotes, when he was editing Gregory of Nyssa. He claimed that Gregory was talking about the mysteries. A teleotes is a person who has been initiated into some degree or other of the mysteries, and the completion of the degree qualifies him as complete or perfect. This word root first appears as indicating various steps from beginning to end of the initiation ordinances of the mysteries. In a recent book, just out this year, Morton Smith has shown at great length that the word mystery, as used by the early Jews and Christians, taught in secret to the apostles, was nothing else than a series of initiatory ordinances for achieving the highest salvation, which today are lost and unknown to the Christian world. He says we don't know what they are, but that is what Christ meant by the mysteries of the kingdom. He meant ordinances, which were necessary, and these he revealed to the apostles during his very confidential teachings of the 40 days after the resurrection. The purpose of such ordinances is to bridge the space between the world in which we now live, the telestial world, and that to which we aspire, the celestial world. Therefore, the events of the temple were thought to take place in the terrestrial sphere. Recall that you leave the creation and you end up at the celestial. But nothing happens in the celestial. Everything happens in the telestial and terrestrial, but not until after you leave the garden. Then the fun begins, until you arrive at your celestial rest. The whole temple represents teleotes. It is also in the telestial world below, a word that nobody used but Joseph Smith. And it means that very thing, the lowest world, the world in which we are placed below the other two. Because the ordinances bridge the two worlds, the telestial and the celestial, the events of the temple were thought to take place in both terrestrial and telestial spheres, the world of the mysteries or ordinances. But the Coptic text called the in-between world the world of transition. This is a beautiful score for Joseph Smith. One of the most famous of all temples was that at Jerusalem. In our day, there are strange stirrings as Jews and Christians begin speculating, you would be surprised by its seriousness, on the advisability of reintroducing some form of temple activity, though they are embarrassed by such basic questions as, what would we do with the temple, and who should be in charge? But because of these new texts coming out, apocalyptic texts, all zeroing in on temples, the temple becomes the center. In Christianity and Judaism, the temple played a strangely ambivalent role. The Judaic ties have been the focus of a number of studies. The Jews like the theme, but they are afraid of it. They don't know what to do about it. They needed to exalt the temple, or else minimize it as a mere building. When the temple stood, it was the palladium of the nation, and it came to be sort of a fetish, something that we learn from Josephus. This led to the dangerous concept that as long as the people had the temple and its rights, they could consider themselves righteous and infallible. Nothing would happen to them. It is the temple of God. Nothing can hurt us. The same natural error hangs over the Latter-day Saints, incidentally, who often regard the temple as a kind of fetish. Sister Eve Nielsen, who works in the library at BYU, specializes in genealogy. She tells that when she was a small girl, she and her brothers and sisters stood at the door of their house in Manti, clinging to their mother's skirts during a terrible thunderstorm and looking at the temple, which had just been finished. Her father was up working on it. They said to their mother, "God will not let lightning strike the temple, will he?" And just as her mother was assuring them that he would not, bang! Lightning struck the east tower, which began to burn briskly. Sister Nielsen's father was in the crew that rushed up and soon put out the fire. When he came home, the children asked him what went wrong. What gives here? He explained to them that the installation of lightning rods had been discussed, but not carried out. He said that God had given the means to protect the temple against lightning, and the workers neglected to use those means. They thus had no right to expect miraculous interventions. God expects us to go on the same as ever. The temple in itself is not a fetish. It is not a palladium. Because the Jews attached their hopes in the end to a building, its destruction had the most crushing effect on them. The Christians exulted, but the Jews thought they would never be restored again because the temple had been destroyed, and the Jews themselves felt utterly discouraged with the passing of the temple. It was all over with. Everything was based on a building. Indeed, the Lord pointed this out more than once. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Christian doctors never tired of the old rhetorical cliché that discoursed on the vanity of putting one's faith in a building. Christ, we are told, destroyed the temple of stone, but the church is a spiritual temple, the only kind of temple that really counts. Do you have to have a physical temple? There we see the ambivalence of the argument. The very fathers, Gregory of Nyssa and John Chrysostom, who inveighed against the folly and idolatry of attributing sanctity to a mere place, a mere building, were the first ones to join in the pious pilgrimage to go back to the ruins of the holy building. The church never gave sanction to pilgrimages to the Holy Land. Its leaders did not like them, but always opposed them. In no instance did the church encourage pilgrimages, but rather actually oppose them. Some people actually insisted on going back to the old order of things because they thought they could find the gospel there. This was the sense of the Crusades, the Crusaders going back to the temple, to the Holy of Holies. This was, in fact, the project of Columbus. He wished to discover the Indies to get enough money to rebuild the temple. The Protestant pilgrims, of course, denounced the folly of going to Jerusalem, yet they have been engaged with unsurpassed vigor and passion in doing just that, especially the less ritually bound Christians like the Quakers. They are the ones who love to make such pilgrimages. The first great modern war, the Crimean, was fought over the protection of the holy places in Jerusalem. Everybody was concerned. World history actually pivots around the temple. James T. Lowe's Geopolitics and War, a discussion of Halford J. Mackinder's theory, is geographically centered in that part of the world, that part of the earth where the sea penetrates the world landmass to a great distance, which makes it the geopolitical center of the world, the most strategic point for dominating the whole world by sea or by land. But not only that, it was the ideological center. Everybody in the great 17th century had great schemes and plans for getting the temple back. It has been an obsession with the Christian world, and many Jews contemplate a forthcoming rebuilding of the temple. The modern world asks with lofty superiority, why a building? Why not a spiritual edifice? Does God need gadgets? We are here in the world to familiarize ourselves with a new medium. We may neither deny the reality of solid things, nor be taken up too much with them. We shouldn't become hypnotized by them. The Oriental monks went to both extremes. They utterly denied the flesh, and so as a result became obsessed with it. We Mormons have gone all out in the past to build temples, making great sacrifices of our means. Yet we have not been attached to the buildings as such. Brigham Young nearly worked himself to death getting the Nauvoo temple built on time, but he did not again want to see a temple built to go into the hands of the wicked. After learning of the destruction of the Nauvoo temple by fire, he said, "Good, Father, if you want it to be burned up. I hoped to see it burned before I left, but I did not. I was glad when I heard of its being destroyed by fire, and of the walls having fallen in, and said, 'Hell, you cannot now occupy it.' It was just a building after all. Why then should he knock himself out? We strive to make our temples beautiful, but if in the eyes of many of us some turn out to be something less than breathtaking, that doesn't dampen our enthusiasm for what goes on in them. My favorite temple is certainly the Provo Temple, though as a building I give it very low marks indeed. We are not attached to the building as such. It is but an endowment house. Basic to all temples is their exclusiveness and isolation. The temple is something set apart. Each dispensation is marked by the return of the temple and its ordinances. The temple lies at the center of apocalyptic literature. Without a temple, there is no true Israel, for there alone is the priesthood. With the destruction of the temple, the Jews also lost the priesthood, and the rabbis rejoiced. We are told that as the temple was burning, the rabbis went to Vespasian and asked, Titus was doing the job, for permission to build the first rabbinical school at Yamnia, and they got it. They actually rejoiced in the fall of the temple. The Christian doctors also rejoiced over the destruction of the temple, gloating over it because it meant the end of the Jews. Without the temple, there could be no Judaism. It could never come back again. This theme very much concerns them now. In 1948, President Truman's emissary had a long discussion with the Pope, who was very emphatic when he said that whatever happens, the Jews must never again build a temple. It was very important. They must never go back to Jerusalem, because the prophecy is that they can never go back. The prospect alarmed and annoyed the Christians, but it also fascinated them. They couldn't leave it alone. The basic institutions of civilization were defined ultimately in the temple or derived from the temple. Many of those institutions became rivals, bitter rivals of the temple, effectively displacing it. Thus, the ancient sophists took over education. When they did so, the university became an anti-temple, which it has remained ever since, adopting the forms of the temple to discredit its teachings and doctrines. In our day, as in various other times in history, the sanctity and the authority of the temple have been preempted in the religion of Mammon, for example. Our banks are designed after the manner of ancient temples, with imposing fronts, ceremonial gates and courts, the onyx, the marble, the bronze. All are the substances of ancient temples. The sacred hush that prevails, the air of propriety, decorum, and dedication. The pious inscriptions on Zion's bank's walls are quotations from Brigham Young, the one man who really had it in for business. The massive vault door, through which only the initiated may pass, gleams chastely in immaculate metal. The symbol makes the reality of all that is safe and secure, that is, the Holy of Holies. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. This is the Lord speaking. We declare that our trust is in God, and we give ourselves away by stamping that declaration where it belongs, on our coins and bills. As it comes and goes through the dispensations, the temple is the bridgehead for Zion, preparing the way, a sort of outpost or outland. It is an alien thing in the world, and as such it is resented. It is feared and envied. It lies as an intruder, the dread and envy of the world, an invader in a wicked and adulterous world. Zion is on the defensive. Our early Latter-day Saint temples were all designed as fortresses, with their buttresses, their battlements, their gates, their walls, always the surrounding wall. If the temple represents the principle of order in chaos, it also represents the foothold, you might say, of righteousness in a wicked world. Someone once asked me concerning the Egyptian ordinances contained in the Joseph Smith manuscripts, is this stuff relevant to the modern world? My answer is no. It is relevant to the eternities. The modern world is as unstable as a decaying isotope, but the temple has always been the same. The ordinances are those taught by an angel to Adam. The bringing of the temple into the world was a reminder in the days of Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Christ, and Joseph Smith that the world as a going concern is coming to a close. That little phase of human existence was about to pass away and give place to another. One of the lessons of the recent scientific research in these many fields is that the course of history and geology, thinking of that Permo-Triassic catastrophe now, is not one of slow, infinitely gradual, salutary evolution. The Lord told the prophet Joseph Smith in the first vision that he was fed up with the world. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. And he was about to remove it. We are told that the sudden catastrophic house cleaning is to take place when the condition of saturation has been reached, when the people are ripe in iniquity. The name of the church will not let us forget that these are the last days. The last days of what? Of the rule of Belial, of the reign of Satan on this earth. In the temple, we first learn by what means Satan has ruled the world, and how it came about, and how he has ruled over the world these many years. Then we proceed to lay the foundation for that order of existence which God intends his children to have here. In both lessons, we deal with specifics. We are given a choice between them. To that degree we live up to the principles and laws of the temple. If we don't live up to them, we are in the power of the other kingdom. It is in the temple that God puts the proposition on the line, and he will not be mocked. The temple is there to call us back to our senses, to tell us where our real existence lies, to save us from ourselves. So let us go there often and face the reality, brethren and sisters. We testify to the truth of the existence of these things. We ask, what did Joseph Smith know about the temple? He knew everything about it. He gave us the complete thing. So we know that the gospel has been restored, and that the temple is the center of things. So we must repair there often. I have gotten so I am almost an addict. I cannot keep away from the temple. I revel in it, the building I call an endowment house, lacking as it does in so many aspects. But that doesn't make any difference. We can see the ordinances and the endowments. It was built for practical purposes. In a speech in the 1880s in St. George, Brother Erastus Snow said that every temple has a slightly different design because it performs a different purpose. The St. George Temple was built after the pattern of the Kirtland Temple to emphasize certain things. Our Provo Temple is built in a different way entirely. It functions with a different thing in mind. Efficiency in getting a lot of work done in a hurry, but also as a teaching tool. In 1897, scholars discovered a marvelous document called the Apocalypse of Abraham. In it, Abraham is shown an ordinance, as if in a moving picture projected on a screen. And an angel instructs him, "Now see this, now this picture. You walk with me in the garden. This is a picture of the Garden of Eden." And Abraham asks, "Who is the man here?" The angel replies, "That is Adam, and the woman is Eve, and I will tell you about them." He leads Abraham through, and then he takes him to the next picture, as it is projected on a screen. Any means we can use to convey the information, to convey the knowledge, will fulfill the Lord's purposes. So no two temples are built alike. Remember what Brigham Young said when they started to build the Salt Lake Temple with 6 towers instead of 1? Now do not any of you apostatize, because it will have 6 towers, and Joseph only built 1. We live in Vanity Fair today, and the temple represents the one sober spot in the world where we can really be serious and consider these things. It is my testimony that the gospel has been restored, and that the Lord intends to fulfill his purposes in these days. And whatever we ask him for, he will give us. This I tell my family without any reservation whatever. I have never asked the Lord for anything that he didn't give to me. Well, you say, in that case, you surely didn't ask for much. No, I didn't. I was very careful not to ask for much. We don't want to be spoiled brats, do we? We ask for what we need, for what we can't get ourselves, and the Lord will give it to us. Don't worry. But he also wants us to get in and dig for the rest. So I pray and hope that the Lord may inspire and help us all to become more engaged, more involved in the work of these latter days, and visit the temple often and become wiser all the time, because he intends to give us more revelations through that instrumentality.
This is the end of this recording. Thank you for being with us. For additional information on this and other Farms publications, call Farms at 1-800-327-6715, 1-800-FARMS-15. You can also reach our website at farmsresearch.com or visit your local LDS bookstore.